They really can become self-fulfilling prophecies. They set us up, they make us more vulnerable to exactly what we fear. And that's why it's so important to learn about aging and to realize how much ageist thoughts we have all internalized, because those thoughts harm our health and harm our self-esteem and harm our progress through life.
Hello, you are listening to the Late Bloomer Living podcast. It's season 4, and here we are still reimagining, rethinking, and redefining what it means to be in midlife and what's possible as we age. We are gathering energy, momentum, and excitement for our next chapter via candid conversations with other midlifers about their own pivots, pitfalls, and triumphs. I'm Yvonne Marchese, your host, and I'm so happy you're here. I created this podcast to give you inspiration and let you know you're not alone in feeling stuck in midlife. Both men and women are welcome here, but if you are a woman, I also invite you to join the Age Agitators Club for Women, where we come together monthly to hatch our plans for making waves as we age. Being part of this community for women will remind you on a regular basis that you're not too old, and it's never too late to do that thing you've been thinking about. You can find more information at latebloomerliving.com/community, and I hope to see you there. Hello, my friend. I am so excited to have Ashton Applewhite joining me on the podcast today. She is one of my heroes. I'm just going to fangirl on her here for a moment. She is an internationally recognized expert on ageism. She's the author of This Chair Rocks, a Manifesto Against Ageism, and co-founder of the Old School Anti-Ageism Clearinghouse. She speaks widely at venues that have included the United Nations, the TED Main Stage, and is at the forefront of the emerging movement to raise awareness of ageism and make age a criterion for diversity. In 2022, the United Nations named Ashton one of the Healthy Aging 50 leaders, transforming the world to be a better place to grow older. Oh, I love that idea. Oh my goodness, because getting old is hard the way we currently have things set up, isn't it?
You know what? What we lose sight of, being young is hard too.
That's true. I can definitely testify to that.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's so funny, Ashton, I've been looking at this aging thing myself.
This aging thing. I feel you.
Really like looking at it critically and with a little more self-awareness, because I have to say all through my 40s, I was looking at the aging thing through a different lens. I was looking at it through the lens of horror, fear. Who is that looking back at me in the mirror? I don't recognize her.
That's what the culture tells us we should feel.
So much so. And I have to say that even though I've been looking at this with more curiosity in the past 4 to 5 years, I still find myself thinking ageist thoughts. It is just so steeped into me that I still have it. And it's like, wow, does that ever go away? I mean, you've been doing this work a long time. Do you feel like you've got a handle on this?
First of all, thanks for being so honest. And no, it never goes away, because we live in a harsh world.
Yeah.
For 2 reasons. I mean, there are probably 100 reasons, and those reasons are different for each of us. We each fear different things. If we live in a community, we might be less worried about being alone. If we have access to good healthcare, we might be less worried about getting sick. If we have financial resources, we might be less worried about running out of money. But all those fears are legitimate and real.
All of them.
Yeah, they are. So
yes.
I never want to be, I'm not one of these positive aging Pollyannas that if you just start saving for your, XYZ account yesterday, or, do enough sit-ups or whatever, it's all going to be fine. Might be fine, might not be fine, right? There are always aspects that are out of our control. And we live in a culture that feeds our fears. So sometimes I think of of being in the both sides of the story business. It doesn't do any good to brush the scary stuff under the rug, because we know from childhood, the things, if we don't think about growing older, we don't think about dying. And those are very different fears. I'll get into
very
one thing
different.
people do is say, oh, of course we don't want to think about aging because it's all about dying. No, it's not.
No, not for me. I'm way more afraid of aging than I am of dying. And I've always known that.
Could be different for someone else, but we know that when we pretend those things aren't happening, it just makes them scarier. They just bubble up. So, so we need to think about those things. But sort of my work is about urging people to do the work that you have bravely embarked on, to look at your own attitudes, because we can't challenge bias unless we're aware of it. We don't hear about age and ageism as much as we hear about sexism and racism. And everyone is ageist. I think racist things too. We're all racist as well. But, ageist thoughts pop into my brain all the time. And so it's just an ongoing process. But I'm curious about what has shifted since you started down this road.
Oh my goodness, so much has shifted. When I look in the mirror these days, Ashton, and I see, I've started growing out the gray hair. The face is getting older than it was when it was in my 40s. But since I've started doing this work, and since I've really just started doing a lot of work on myself regarding meditating and doing mindfulness practices and taking care of my body in a way that I wasn't in my 40s, because I had young kids and I was just barely keeping up.
Okay.
I feel at 55 years old, which is how old I am now, I feel so much more energetic. I feel like I'm just getting started. I am excited about my next 20, 30, who knows how long, many years I have left, whatever they might be. I still fear the parts of aging that are really scary to me. My dad has dementia. So that for me is scary.
Any scarier than that,
Yeah.
And dementia is a perfect example. It's a horrible disease. I think it's actually foolish to think in terms of a cure. I think we are getting better. Perhaps there'll be a cure, but we're getting hopefully more supportive of people with dementia and helping people with dementia. But it is a case of two things. Nobody knows that dementia rates are falling. Now, that is an utterly useless statistic to you because your dad has dementia. Mm-hmm. However, the odds of getting dementia have gotten lower and lower, and people are being diagnosed at later ages.
So fascinating. And that's not right? What, if you ask somebody on the street, that is not what they're going to say, right?
Because the culture feeds our fears. They divide us. It's profitable to drug industries and to foundations to have us be afraid, to have us be divided. So we're back again already to let's hear both sides of the story. The statistic from the Alzheimer's Association is that 1 out of 10 Americans will get dementia. That's a lot of people, and it's an awful disease. I am not for a minute saying, hey, don't worry, it's nothing to worry about. But the age curve is that most people most people get it in pretty late in life, in their 80s, in their 90s. And that does mean that 9 out of 10 people think just fine to the end. And where ageism comes in is, as I mentioned, there's an awful lot we can't control about getting older. We can control our attitudes. And attitudes towards aging affect how our minds and bodies function at the cellular level. There's tons of data. We won't have time to get to it all. Go to my blog, thischairrocks.com, enter dementia, enter health, enter cognition, enter Levy, Levy, the scholar Yale, who has done, and you will see all the latest data around this. And the point is that people who have a more accurate view of aging, a fact-based attitude rather than a fear-based attitude, the statistic and the fact around dementia is amazing. They are less likely to get Alzheimer's, even if they have the gene that predisposes them to the disease. Right. And the scientists' thinking is that more positive attitude acts as a buffer against stress, against prejudice. So knowing that dementia rates are falling, when you can't find your glasses, or your damn slippers or whatever the hell it is, we think, oh crap, or worse than crap. Like, I mean, and that's a gasp of genuine fear,
Yeah, back in my 40s, if I lost my keys, if I lost my phone, I would joke around and say, "Oh, I'm having a senior moment." And I now know that those jokes were not serving me in the least and not true.
And they really can become self-fulfilling prophecies. They set us up, they make us more vulnerable to exactly what we fear. And that's why it's so important to learn about aging and to realize how much ageist thoughts we have all internalized, because those thoughts harm our health and harm our self-esteem and harm our progress through life.
Yeah, and that's Becca Levy that has the book talking about that connection between how we're looking at aging and what it does to our health, right?
Yes. Read my book and read Breaking the Age Code.
Breaking the Age Code. That's what I was trying to think of.
Instead of remembering that, I'll do a plug for the Old School Clearinghouse, which is a site I make $0 off, but it is it's a website where all the best resources about ageism and what we can do about it are in one place, oldschool.info. So if you can't remember Levy's name or brain health or whatever, noodle around, go to books, search for Levy, you'll find it. And it's all those things in one place.
I love that you've put that together. And I'll have a link in the show notes for everybody to that Old School Clearinghouse. Thanks. And your blog, Yo, Is This Ageist, as well. I'll have a lot of links for people so that you can go find Ashton after this episode. So you started to touch on it, but there is a question that I want to ask you just to kind of poke the bear a little bit. What does it matter? What does it matter that we are aware of ageism? Why bother? You're doing a lot of activism around this. What is driving you?
Well, how about activism? Just the fact that it'll make you less likely to get Alzheimer's. I mean, isn't that one like blue chip reason?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Another, I mean, aging is like every human process, utterly unique. We age in different ways. We age at different rates, socially, physically, cognitively. The longer we live, the more different from one another we become. So something that is a problem for me might not be a problem for you. For example, I have arthritis, and now over 2 years ago, I had a total shoulder replacement. Yay, works great. If I were a left-handed tennis player, that would be really, really a problem for me. I don't play tennis. It didn't mess up my tennis game, but something else. I mean, I was thinking, I was talking to someone who's named Peter Fremlin, who has a wonderful newsletter around disability called Disability Debrief. And I am almost completely deaf in this ear because of a brain tumor called acoustic neuroma. And I said, Peter, I don't identify as disabled. Is that denial? And he said, well, if you lost your little finger, you wouldn't be disabled. But if you were a concert pianist, you would be. It depends. It always depends. It's never binary. You would think I would know that by now, but there I am like, am I being a hypocrite? Do I need to rethink this? Talking to you right now, I'm not disabled. In a crowded restaurant, I'm disabled. So it all depends on who we are. But for me, doing work around my age bias makes me, as you said, more confident, more knowledgeable, more aware of where my fears lie, and more able to put them in perspective, which is a huge help to me.
I'm thinking of, two things. I was thinking of the connection between ageism and ableism, and I've had Tracy Gendron on the podcast before, and I love how she highlights that connectivity between those two things, because I have to say that a good bit of my fear around aging has to do with some ableism, because I am so afraid of being dependent on somebody else to help me in some way, or I don't want to lose my independence. And I think, so I do everything I can to stay healthy. I'm doing anything I can think of to eat right, exercise, keep my mind in shape, all the things, right? And here's the thing is, as I do more and more and more of this work, I'm realizing the truth is I'm really resilient. I think we all are. We made it this far, and we don't give ourselves enough credit for our resilience. And if I lose my hearing, which I think I might be going in that direction, or if I, go blind, if something happens that is completely just out of my control, I'm starting to think, you know what? I think I might be okay. Because
just that thought process is helpful, because it turns this big, dark, terrifying, faceless entity into a set of issues that you can think about, as you just so eloquently described. And I'd like to point out another binary: dependent, independent. Do you fix your own car? Do you pick your kids up at school every day? I don't know how old your kids are, right? Do you, do you check your own vision? Do you, a thousand things? Do you, bring clean water to your house? I mean, we are all interdependent. First of all, you rely on an enormous network, I'm sure, of friends and family and colleagues to support you and educate you and all those things. No one is independent ever. And we are conditioned to think, am I old? Am I on the wrong side of some velvet rope and it's all going to go to hell, right? Am I going to become one day, dependent? There was a fantastic quote, it's in my book, by a Dutch gerontologist named Jan Bars. Autonomy requires collaborators. If you, one of these days, maybe driving won't be safe. Maybe you'll end up having a hard time with, I already have a hard time with financial forms. I try and get anyone to do any number involving paperwork for me. If we want to have the old age we think we want, and guess what? We're not going to know what we want till we get closer to it, but you still have to think about it. Think about it, revisit it. Oh, that seemed like a great idea then. Now, not such a great idea. Oh, I didn't realize that was going to be important to me, but it looks like it is, right? We don't know what we're going to want, but we're going to rely on a network of people, no matter what, to have the old age that we want. It's not about independence or dependence.
Yeah, it's that binary thing that we just tend to want to, it's the classification, right? So this is so funny. I was thinking before I got on with you, I was frankly a little nervous because the language that I need to use to communicate what I'm trying to communicate, like a lot of things I'll say, I'll talk about midlife. Well, what is midlife? Midlife can start in your 30s. Where does it end? You don't know what the middle is really. What is the terminology that we can use that is not binary, that is, but still can reach people in the language that they're used to using? Because if I'm going to put out a blog, there's a certain amount of like, okay, well, I need to use the language that somebody else is going to use when they're thinking of the problem, So how do you use the language without perpetuating the ageism?
Language is never neutral. Language is a moving target. We're all going to make mistakes. Sort of the bottom line is, when you're worried about what to call someone, just ask, and listen to the answer. Some people say, I'm disabled, and they foreground that. But more in general, people want to be someone with autism, not called autistic, but people are different. So, there's that. I do feel like I have solved the what to call old people problem, because when I was writing my book, I literally got tired of typing older people, and I shortened it to olders and youngers. And I know that they are inventions, and I know that always gives people a little hiccup, but no one doesn't understand what they mean. And we age in relation to others. If you are in a room full of older people, you are younger, right? You are certainly in midlife, unless, I shouldn't say this, but, you could get hit by a car walking out your door, in which case, it wasn't midlife after all. We don't know, right? We don't know. We don't know how long we're going to live. But if we refer to each other as olders and youngers, if you just say younger people, if you're talking about people, you escape that trap. or older people, because it depends in relation to you. And again, you are aging at different rates from loads of other people your age. No one else is doing 55 the way you are doing 55. No one else is 71 the way I am 71. So the minute we group people, humanity, into age groups, especially by year, but even generation, another, I'm on a bit of a tear about this, but try, and you haven't, and it's really tempting and really common, try not to use the word generation. Because so tempting.
Yes.
But you know who loves generations? Marketers.
Right.
Demographers, and people selling the idea to managers and employers that there's one way to manage 24 to 28-year-olds, and then there's a whole nother way to manage 29 to 35. Guess what? There are very few actual differences. People want a decent salary. People want health care. People want flex time.
I will say that on the generation thing, it is something that I have used in show notes, descriptions, social media. And the reason I choose to use them is because if somebody's looking for something, or I want to trigger, let's say, an algorithm on social media or something like that, if I want to reach the right people for my message, I'll go ahead and use those terms. But then I'm like, ooh, am I perpetuating the problem, or what am I doing here?
Listen, it's fantastic that you're thinking about these things, because that's the first step. The problem with generation is that it fosters, there is no scientific basis for the term, except in the idea that your kids are a different generation from you. There is a biological generation. But other than that, no one agrees. I mean, a generation can be 4 years or 10 years. The idea that everyone born roughly around the same age everywhere in the world is the same is clearly absurd. And the minute we have a generational label, all of us, no judgment, all sorts of associations click into mind. Boomer, Gen X, millennial, and none of those, the devil is in making assumptions. And the minute we have a label, a whole set of assumptions click into place. And those assumptions divide us. They foster stereotyping, and they also cover up. They give age more value, much more value than it deserves. Where we were born, our culture, our socioeconomic status, our gender, all those things, our race, have much, much more to do with our life experience than age does. So when we act as though age is the thing that makes people a certain way, it not only gives age more value than it deserves in a really damaging way, it covers up the role of class in particular in shaping who we are.
Yeah. I was thinking too, as you're speaking about this whole idea of ableism and independence versus dependence, that binary idea. Have you read The Beauty of Dusk by Frank Bruni? I
have not.
Oh, I have to highly recommend it, because he, I believe, is a New York Times
he is
writer.
He's a columnist, an op-ed writer,
and is losing his sight. And that led him down this idea of, well, what does that mean that I'm losing my sight? What does this mean for my life? And he wrote a book. It's called The Beauty of Dusk on Vision Lost and Found. And he starts to talk to a lot of different people with different, if you want to call them, handicaps. Again, let's go into that. People who have had different things happen and how they have coped with them, and how that's actually enriched their lives, where you've got that thing that happens to you that looks like a terrible thing, but then where's the gift in the terrible thing?
And it looks like a terrible thing, which is not to say that life without vision is more complicated, and in a world that's oriented to the needs of people with sight that doesn't pay enough attention to vision deficits, indeed, it is harder. So it's complicated. It's always complicated, not to speak in, absolute terms of, what a gift, or ever to presume we know what another person is experiencing, but adapting to these processes, which are inevitable to some degree and in all of us, is, it taps into our deepest fears, but it taps into the most beautiful aspects of being human as well. I mean,
Yeah.
the disability community has united in these really gorgeous, powerful ways around identifying as disabled and saying, I'm not XYZ, a famous person in the world, despite being blind. It is in a very real sense because of being blind, right? That is part of myself and my soul and how I navigate in the world. And it is not something I'm ashamed of, and want to hide.
Yeah. It's gives me hope to think that whatever is going to come down the pike for me as I age, that there will be gifts gifts to be found in those limitations that come with the things that might happen to me physically or mentally, that there might be hidden gifts in there, that if I'm willing to open those gifts, that could be.
Or even just be open-minded and see them as having positive aspects as well as negative aspects.
Hey, we're going to take a quick break here because I want to let you know that this podcast episode is brought to you by Midlife Cues. Are you looking to live life more intentionally and grow personally as you get older? The Midlife Cues newsletter is the perfect solution for you. Every Sunday, you can open up your email to find a weekly newsletter filled with carefully researched resources and tools to help you live your best life. It's written and published by Lou Blazer, who left a successful career in corporate America and now focuses on helping midlifers be truly happy and feel fulfilled in the second half of their lives. You can subscribe today at midlifecues.com. You're doing so much activism. That is what you do now, right? That is your full-time gig?
My full-time gig.
Your full-time gig. What is it that you hope to achieve through the activism that you're doing?
Oh, I'm already achieving it. It's fantastic. I'm gonna go to my main website and bring up my latest newsletter because it is so full of unbelievably great, concrete evidence of culture change is rare, especially around raising awareness of something, so many people, haven't thought about until recently, ageism, as
and
opposed
don't want to talk about. Do you think that people don't want to talk about aging because then it identifies them?
Age cooties, right? But let's just take a small example. All the discourse around that politicians being too old, air quotes around that, for office. Almost every article says, a writer says, I know this is ageist, but that is huge progress.
Okay, I'll take that as progress. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And October is a busy month in Ageland because October 1st is the United Nations International Day of Older People. And but since then, just this October, the first national anti-ageism campaign kicked off in Australia in 2019. In 2021, the World Health Organization, which is not the World Old People Organization, launched a global campaign to combat ageism. Think about that, because they realized that the biggest obstacle to increasing health span, right, the number of years we're healthy, along with longevity, which is increasing everywhere in the world, was age bias. So they launched this fantastic campaign. This October, they have more funding. They now have a dedicated website. They're doing all these resources, all of which you can find on oldschool.info. And then there's been all this activism around older women. I don't know if you've noticed, in Hollywood and in general.
Oh my gosh. I feel like I'm part of a movement. And I don't know how much of that is just my perception because I'm steeped in this and I'm talking about it with people like you all the time, but I feel like there's more and more and more of us.
There is more and more. You're not
exciting.
You believe me, if you think you wonder if you're just seeing what you want to see, I really ask myself that all the time. There's Say Your Age campaigns. There is I mean, there's so much. Then
Golden
just
Bachelor.
on October 1st, the Help Age International launched a global 3-year campaign called Older, Not Over.
Yes.
About aging and ageism around the world, which is fantastic. They have this beautiful footage of people in Africa saying that they're older, not over, and why. And Ageism Awareness Day, that's a thing. Now, it's still a small thing, but it started in Australia 3 years ago, and then it got a bit bigger. And this year,
Is
the
it only
American
3 years?
Society on
Oh,
Aging got behind it. Yeah. So, last but not least, Britain, the UK is launching and I'm helping them with it. I'm on the advisory board, a national UK campaign, which is, I have to say, really good. It was really good before I came anywhere near it. Around raising awareness of ageism across the country with like billboards and bus ads and a really smart 6-week layered campaign. I am not making this up.
that is some good, solid evidence for
it's good,
progress.
solid evidence.
Yes.
Yeah. So I know, when we started old school with just we thought it would be like this little spreadsheet that only nerdy people would pay attention to. Like, if you want to find stuff about ageism, the movement is new. Let's put it in one place where people can find it. We didn't have a campaign section, and now it's got 35 campaigns and growing. And some of those, because we want the site to be up to date, some of the campaigns have expired. So it's been more than that over the years. That's evidence.
Wow. And that makes me think of a change that's happened. And a lot of those things that you just mentioned are just in the last, 4-5 years.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about your book. I love that on your website, I was looking at your bio, and one of the things that you highlighted was that you self-published the manifesto in 2016 because no mainstream publisher recognized the importance of the issue, but then, subsequently sold the rights to a publisher. And that to me is very hopeful, that
it is. I mean,
publishers are starting to recognize this.
I was just in Japan to promote the Japanese edition.
That's exciting.
Which was exciting. Now, I have to say, the rights and the Turkish edition came out this summer. It's been published in China, in Taiwan, mainland and Taiwan, a whole bunch of languages. No German edition yet, no Spanish edition, no French edition. There's still this real, reluctance, age cooties. It is a topic that scares people and that they think it's going to be sad and icky. So, the resistance is real too, but we are making absolutely colossal progress. And these things have tipping points. Once it's not linear, once words and ideas get out into the culture, then they start to proliferate more rapidly.
Yes, absolutely. It builds on itself like a snowball going downhill, doesn't it? And as you're talking about this and thinking about the age cooties and
my scientific term.
I love that term. And it's also something that I pulled actually as I was reading your book, the idea of the age tsunami versus the gray, not age tsunami, but the gray tsunami versus the gray reservoir idea. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, that gets back to the power of language. There was a demographer named Philip Longman who coined this term, which caught on like crazy. And it was a clever, phrase as a way to represent population aging. There are more older people in the world than ever before, and that is going to continue. But think about the metaphor of a tsunami is like this terrifying event that you have no warning of that crashes on a defenseless shore and sucks all the good stuff out to sea. So the idea is that this massive, helpless, greedy, incapacitated old people would impoverish the people left behind. Population aging is not a tsunami. It is a demographic wave lapping up very gently on a shore. It is the best studied demographic phenomenon in history. And by chance, the latest post on my blog is a challenge to the idea that all these things that people have been worried about, that population will cost us, the staggering increases in pension costs, They're tiny. Pension spending, most, the baby boom, of which I am dead center, born in 1952, supposed to impoverish pension systems worldwide. That hasn't happened, right?
Do
None
pensions
of,
even exist anymore?
yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Healthcare systems are going to be bankrupted by all these sick old people. That hasn't happened. This alarmist rhetoric, it's like the red peril, around communism, or the yellow menace around Chinese workers in the US from China. It's a way to demonize
It
and
is.
other.
It's a vilification of people based on something that everybody's going to do. Every single person is, if they're lucky, is going to age. So sooner or later, you're going to end up in that demographic, right?
Yeah, if you're lucky.
If you're
And
lucky.
I think the phrase "the silver ocean" was coined by Jeanette Liardi, who a social gerontologist, whom you can find on Old School. And and people have come up with other riffs on that. It's another metaphor. Population aging, are there challenges associated with meeting the needs of an older population? Absolutely, but most of them have to do with ability and capacity, which are not inherently, they're age related, but lots of older people continue to function just fine in the world to the end. And lots of younger people need social supports and have disability and have chronic illness. It's not about age. Again, it's about class, and it's about the social systems that support all of us to live better at any point in our lives. You need help at different times. You need help if you have kids when they are little. You need help if you lose your job. You need help if you're trying to juggle 6 jobs in a heartless gig economy, or if your landlord is greedy, et cetera, et cetera. It's not about age. And these narratives, that when in anxious times, we look for scapegoats, and God knows these are anxious times.
Oh, yeah.
Old people make a useful scapegoat, partly because no one wants to identify as an old person, but there's no data, there's no evidence that these fears are biased. There's no such thing as intergenerational warfare. There's no evidence that old people don't care about young people, or that young people want to throw granny to the wolves. That's an invention, like the whole generation, that the idea of generations underlies that, right? Those old generations are benefiting at the expense of the young. It's not true. There's no data for it. We are in the middle of the biggest intergenerational wealth transfer in history, as people my age and older die off, which we are going to do, and pass on our stuff, which is the way it should be. We're not going to take it with us to the grave, nor do we want to.
So I'm thinking back to the beginning of your book, when what inspired you, I think, to write This Chair Rocks and declare your manifesto, was your own realization of your own internalized ageism. And I'm thinking of Ray, who was an older guy that you worked with, I believe, that you're like, oh, I don't want to be like him.
Well, he was a guy who was exactly my age.
Uh-huh. Oh, he was your age. That's right.
He was my age, exactly. He was like 4 months older or younger. And I mean, this is embarrassing to admit, but what started it was exactly the reckoning you talked about yourself at the very beginning in this, looking in the mirror, looking around, and realizing how apprehensive you were. So that was the sort of thinky catalyst. But an example of that was, Ray sort of had a sort of portly Santa Clausy way about him, partly because he had gray hair and this little fringe of gray hair. And he's pretty, I mean, I'm trying to remember, because it was 20 years ago. But he did, he had this very careful life, and he had this sort of, I'm trying to think how to talk about it in a way that doesn't focus on his appearance, but he was very, different from me in his dress and demeanor and lifestyle in a way. And I can't even say it looked old, because of course that's the mother of all ageist statements. Right. But he certainly, if you put, him and me in a room, you would identify me with a younger cohort. And I thought, what if people, when I learned his birthday was the same as mine, I do remember this. And I did talk about it in public to my colleagues, I outed myself. I thought, what if people find out, they'll think I'm old too, which was gross, because it was so denigrating of Ray. and, in a way that was not okay. So ridiculous. First, who cares if we're the same age? And last I checked, my colleagues didn't have any trouble telling us apart and understanding what was important and valuable about each of us, and liking or disliking us on the basis of who we are, not how old we happen to be.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing now is the 20 years of work that you've been doing around this thought work in your own brain. It's like getting in under the hood, right? And jiggering around with the connections in your own brain to try to talk about this thing that was Ashton's thoughts 20 years ago from Ashton now, looking at it and trying to couch it all in terms that are now acceptable to you compared to what was acceptable to you back then. I'm always
changing the way I think and saying things that I don't say anymore, and realize I'm like, oh, that was not okay.
I'm raising my hand. Yep.
Right there with you. But that is how we learn, and we're gonna make mistakes, but people, I think, understand your approach, if you're, and if you don't pretend to be the boss with all the answers, and also, when it comes to the one universal human experience, you're not going to find one way to talk about it that works for everyone. For a while there, my working title for this whole thing was I'm not Ray, and Ray's not me. Who knows what Ray thought of me?
Right.
It's like we're different, and you need to just approach each person as an individual. Maybe you couldn't stand Ray, maybe they couldn't stand me, but not because of our age.
Right. So I have one last question for you. I could talk to you all day, Ashton, but I'm for time's sake, I have one last question for you. And that is, in the time that you've been doing this work, what have you learned about yourself?
I have learned to get better at meeting people where they are. It's which is important. I feel like this work is so important, just so people are less fearful, because fear makes us stupid and fear divides us. So it can be really easy to get on a soapbox and say, no, you need to think this way, or here's why you're saying that in a way I don't approve of. And that's not helpful. So I would say I'm working on that.
That's amazing. I am just thrilled that you took the time to be here with us today. Thank you for that. And
you're welcome. Thank you for the work you are doing.
Thank you. Yeah. So the best place for people to find you, is it This Chair Rocks?
Yeah, my main website is thischairrocks.com. I am on social media trying to wean myself off Twitter, now X, YZ, at This Chair Rocks, Instagram at This Chair Rocks. I'm really easy to find. I have a Q&A blog called Yo, Is This Ageist?, where you can send in if you've seen or heard or perhaps done something that you wonder whether or not it's ageist. That's the place to put it. And then that's a record, so if you want to, that one really sort of, I hope it's fun, way to learn about how ageism shows up in the world, because it's new to most of us, is just to scroll through Yo, Is This Ageist? And see some, usually it's ageist, but not always, it depends. And also, guess what? You might disagree with my answer, and that's okay too.
So I just want to take just a couple of moments to tell you a quick story. I was in a party store trying to find some things to help celebrate my mother's 80th birthday last year. And I'm standing in the party aisle, and I'm looking at all the things around for anything that says 80th birthday, anything. And it was all so ageist. It was not all of it. 90-something% of what I saw in front of me, I was kind of horrified by, frankly. And this guy comes around the corner, and he sees me looking at everything and contemplating, and he says, "Oh, haha, looks like we're going to the same party." And I said, "Yeah, I'm actually kind of horrified by everything that I'm seeing here." And he was like, "Okay, well, I guess we're not going to talk about that." And he just went by. I started laughing, and I was like, I scared him. Basically, he had no idea what to do with what I had just told him.
But you got him thinking, and you didn't do it in an aggressive way, right? You were just like standing. So you just made him do a reset, which is good.
And we did laugh about it. So that was good. Yeah. I didn't scare him away totally, but oh my goodness, it was funny.
I'm just putting 2 more links, which I hope you'll, speaking of evidence that the culture is changing and that we have more options. There's a movement, a group for better birthdays, how to celebrate birthdays in non-ageist ways, and a woman who has a fantastic line of non-ageist birthday cards. Or just honestly noodle around. I can think of off the top of my head another initiative. There's a great group in Colorado called Changing the Narrative, and they have a yearly contest for non-ageist birthday cards. So all this stuff is happening. It really is.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you again, Ashton.
You're very welcome, Yvonne. Keep up your important work.
Thank you. Well, there you have it. My main takeaway from our conversation is the idea that the language we use around the topic of aging is really important. Words are powerful, my friend. All through my 40s, I was using the language available to me where I was telling myself a really negative story about getting older. And I wasn't even aware I was doing it, but I can tell you now, it was absolutely stopping me from living my best life because I thought I'd missed the boat and was convinced it was all downhill. It's only when I became aware of it that I started to question whether or not everything I'd been told about aging was true. Awareness was really key for me and still is. And I know I still have work to do here because I still catch myself doing this, folks. But the fact that I'm aware of it is where the power lies. And what I know for sure is that I'm not as afraid of aging as I used to be. And that has gifted me with a feeling of freedom around my choices for whatever I may do next. I no longer feel like it's too late to pursue my dreams. I've been following Ashton Applewhite's work for so long now. I'm just thrilled to have had a chance to sit down and talk with her. If you want more information about her work, you can find a link to her website in the show notes. Just go to latebloomerliving.com and look for episode 161. But hey, before we say goodbye this week, for those of you who get my emails or follow me on social media, you may already know that I just published a new book. I still have to pinch myself when I say that. Wow. It's titled In Full Bloom, A Guide to Aging Playfully. It's a gift book that combines photos I've taken of flowers with definitions of the word bloom, along with my thoughts about why I think that any age is the perfect age to bloom. It's really an exploration of how embracing playfulness can transform your perspective on aging. So thank you so much if you already bought your copy. Oh my gosh, just a couple of days after I posted about the book on Facebook, you guys took the book to the top 10 bestseller list for the midlife management book category on Amazon for a couple of days. I blew my mind. And I'm really just so grateful for your support. More importantly, though, I hope you'll keep the book by your bedside or on your desk so you can look at it every day to remind yourself that you're not too old and it's never too late to do that thing that you've been wanting to do. And I don't know when you'll actually be listening to this episode, but as I record this, it's November of 2023, and Thanksgiving is right around the corner. And I'm working on cultivating gratitude in my life. So I'll leave you with a final question to ponder if you are also working on cultivating gratitude. Are you ready? Here it is. What are the hidden rewards of getting older? What are you grateful for that's only possible because you're older? And here's a second question for you to ponder. Would your younger self ever have expected that answer? That's all for now. Happy Thanksgiving, my friend. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a fantastic week. Stay safe and well, and talk soon.